My name is Megan Tyler, and I have been practicing yoga for the past decade in my own personal practice and have been teaching for the last 5 years and have fallen in love with sharing this practice and really sharing the importance behind understanding the postures and that every body is going to be unique. Every unique person has a unique body, right? And that shape is going to look different from posture to posture, from body to body. So I've been breaking down postures so that you can better understand the modifications that are available to you, the variations that are available to you in each posture that you can explore in your own practice using props, using maybe just different little tweaks in the posture that you didn't realize were there that are available for you to use, right, from practice to practice, because the practice is going to vary. And that's why it's called a practice. Is it's not this linear thing. It's not this like hill that you climb and reach and that you've like conquered. It's something that's going to like fluctuate every single day and every single practice. So that's what these tutorials are about teaching you what to look for in your shape, in your own body, so that you can find that sweet and comfortable spot where you can feel confident in that shape to find your stretch and then build from there, because from there it can always go backwards or forwards on that scale of like how you modify it to ease up if maybe your body isn't ready for it that day, or maybe you have an injury you're working through or something, or a way to challenge yourself in the days that you feel really good and you want to maybe take a little further, or you've built up that foundation where your body is asking for more, right? But a lot of times we go into these exercise classes just going for that like peak posture, and that's not what yoga's about. Yoga's not about the postures. It's about those in-between moments. And this is part of those in-between moments, listening to what you need so that you can find the shape that best works for you. Enough talking. Let's get to it. The shape that I have for you today is downward facing dog, otherwise known as Adho Mukha Svanasana in Sanskrit. So let's go ahead and head back to our mat. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways that you can enter into this posture from various other places that you might be in your practice, or just knowing like, okay, how do I get into it if I just want to practice this one shape? So I'll give you a couple different ways that you can get into it, and then I'll give you your different options of how to play with it once you're in it. So for our downward facing dog, you can start standing at the back of your mat is one option. Start standing. Maybe you find length in the spine and forward fold. If you saw my forward fold video, this is where you can start, and then you can walk forward into your downward dog from there. So just walking your hands to the top of the mat, creating this upside down V shape, right? So I'll break down more of what you want to feel in this posture after I go through the 3 other ways that you can come into it. So from your downward dog, I'm just going to lower down onto the knees into a tabletop. Because from my tabletop, what I can do is curl under the toes, lift the knees, press the hips up high, let the head drop. And that's your downward dog. Simultaneously from our mat, from our tabletop, if I were to spread the knees out wide, bring the toes to touch, drop the hips back, and take those arms long, I'm in my child's pose with the head relaxed. So maybe I'm practicing my child's pose and I decide I want to do a little downward dog. You can lift up onto the hands and knees, curl under the toes, press those hips up high, head relaxes, and you're in your V shape. So that's your third option. The fourth option is, again, from standing, but maybe at the top of your mat. You stand, again, nice and tall, reach up high, and forward fold. From this forward fold at the top of the mat, you can plant the hands down and just walk the feet back, keeping those hips high, finding your V shape, right? So those are 4 different ways that you can come into your downward dog, either from standing, fold at the back of your mat and walk the hands forward into the shape. From the top of the mat, a standing fold, walking the feet back from that shape. Or if you're on your mat from your child's pose, just lifting yourself up into your downward dog, or similarly from your tabletop, also lifting up from there. Now let's get into the modifications that we can play with and explore, the variations we can explore from our downward dog. And I'll break down a little bit of how this downward dog should feel when you're in this shape. So when you set up, I'm going to come up from our tabletop. We want our hands nice and wide, so all 10 fingers spread out nice and wide. And finding a nice firm base in all 10 fingers, right? So the pads of the palm as well as the pads of the fingertips, all pressing down into the mat. And those should be about shoulder width distance apart. As you curl under the toes and lift the knees, the hips will start to lift up high to the sky and the head relaxes. You're finding that upside down V shape where the hips are pressing high to the sky and you're pressing into the palms and chest towards the thighs. Your head should be hanging heavy towards the floor. Your neck is loose. And then the heels pressing towards the floor, maybe touching one day. So this is getting into where you might be feeling these places of restriction. So maybe the heels aren't quite touching the floor, and that's okay. They don't have to touch the floor, but check in what it feels like to bend the knees as a modification. A lot of times when we get into this, we're told straighten out through the legs, and that's a lot down the back line of the body as you press the heels towards the earth. So check in what it feels like to bend into the knees as you press the hips high and chest towards the thighs. The shoulders roll away from the ears. The head is heavy, maybe shaking out your head a little bit while you're here. This is a great warm-up posture for the whole body. You should be feeling your shoulders firing up. It's great strengthening into your hands, your wrists, as well as the back line of the body, down your low back, into your hamstrings, your ankles, your calves, all of that good stuff. It's also really great for circulation because it's a slight inversion with your head below your heart, right? And it's a great warm up for the body because you're using your whole body here and you feel that heat kick on. So where do we take it from here if you're like, wow, this is a lot, can't quite be here for that long? What you can try doing with this shape first is, again, play with that bend in the knees. How much can we bend the knees to settle in as you press into the palms and chest towards the thighs? Maybe you play with separating the feet a little wider in the edges of your mat. Maybe you walk the hands in a little closer, right? Shortening your downward dog. Maybe that gives you more space. If that's still not quite comfortable enough for you or not quite where you want for today, then maybe you come down to the mat and find a tabletop. You can definitely find a tabletop as a variation in your practice while others are doing downward dog. That is totally okay. Because when people do a downward dog and do that three-legged dog, you can just do a three-legged tabletop and work from there, right? Bringing that knee forward, right? Stepping through, whatever that is from that flow. We're not taking it there today. So let me show you one more option that you can use for your downward dog, and that is utilizing our wonderful yoga blocks. So grabbing 2 yoga blocks here, or maybe you have books at home or some kind of firm piece of wood or something, but something where you can place underneath the hands to give yourself a little lift. Because from here, you're creating a little more space, bringing your hands a little higher, kind of filling in that gap to then curl under the toes, lift the hips, and find that downward dog shape, that upside down V shape, letting the head relax. Chest pressed towards the thighs, hips high. You can still work on bending the knees here as much as you need and find your sweet spot. So maybe the blocks are something you never thought about and something you want to try in your practice. Or maybe you try bending the knees. Maybe you try walking your downward dog in, right? All of these things that maybe just don't get mentioned in a group class when the instructor is trying to focus on multiple students, right? And everyone's going to be at a different place. So if you're going to group classes, this is where you kind of have to take responsibility of your own practice and where you want to take your own personal practice. Because it can be such a cool place to be where you have the freedom to play with these shapes because your body is telling you what it needs, right? It's not your ego. There's a mind-body connection that you can build where you are serving your body in a better way through these exercises and through these movements and through these stretches versus when your ego is fueling it and you may overdo it. You may not be honoring the rest that your body's really calling for, and you may burn out quicker doing an exercise or doing a regimen than you were expecting. So give these a try and let me know what you think. I'm going to keep rolling out these tutorials. So stay tuned for what's next and hit subscribe if you want to be the first to know and be notified when those videos go live. I'll be trying to do them weekly, so stay tuned and there'll be more to come.